Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines with Nixon and Stranahan, 105.5 FM and 1390 AM in Washington, D.C. and KCXL in Kansas City. We have with us now speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst, and author of City Builders and Vandals in Our Age, articles and essays on socialism, Caleb Maupin. Caleb, welcome back to Fault Lines.
Sure. Glad to be here, as always.
Caleb, before we get started on the issue of jobs and healthcare, I know that's something you've been working on. Let's start here. You know, we've been talking with you. You've been there kind of in ground zero. I've watched some of your videos. Great stuff. People, I would recommend that people go to Caleb's YouTube channel. He's got a lot of great discussions, some good guests. But you've said, that you and your wife were kind of huddled in during the worst of it, going out for groceries and running right back in. How's things in New York? I understand that, that things are opening back up. People are getting out. The numbers are down. What are your feelings about how are you getting out? What are your feelings about how things are going as far as the reopening in New York City?
Well, Brooklyn, where I live, is the center. I mean, it is ground zero of the epidemic. And, there are different parts of the state that are more opened up, but New York City is still pretty much locked down. I mean, I see people in the park outside of my house. I'll look out the window, but, people are wearing masks. Businesses, restaurants are open for takeout, but no one's going to be sitting in there. And it's pretty much shut down simply because we're facing this ongoing threat and the cases here. Now, we've seen a decrease in the number of deaths and the number of infections. That's a good thing. So fingers crossed, we're hoping that pretty soon we can be opened up. But New York City has been so badly hit in comparison to the rest of the country. I think things are going to open up slower here than in other places.
So I'll tell you what I noticed. I was out over the weekend here in Virginia. And what I noticed, I went to the grocery store. And there's a haircut place. It's part of a chain. I'm not mentioning it, but it's a chain most people have heard of. And I noticed it was closed, which didn't surprise me. But then I kind of looked in the window because I was walking by, and it's closed. I mean, they are shutting down that location. It was stripped. You could tell they're moving out. And I'm going to note that because, again, it's part of a chain. Therefore, to me, are you seeing businesses in your area at all, Caleb, that have just that ain't opening up again, that are just gone?
Oh, sure. And that's the reality of this. I mean, in New York City, where you've got very, very high rents, real estate costs are just massive here. If your business is going to be closed down for a month or 2 months, you can't survive. New York City is a place that a lot of people, that are small business owners, they come to start their novelty restaurant. And there's a lot of small businesses in New York City that people hope that this is the place they're going to succeed. And New York City is not the place to be facing a pandemic if you are a small business owner. I mean, you can just forget it. And we are seeing significant closings. And as a result, I know that Catholic Charities in Queens, which has been providing aid to people who've lost their jobs, has just been swamped. People outside for blocks and blocks and blocks and blocks. Trying to get some assistance. I mean, this is economically a devastating situation for a lot of people here in the city. It's a big, big problem. Now, they're not evicting people. They put evictions on hold. They put utility shutoffs on hold, and that's preventing some of the fallout. But the situation is bad for a lot of working people, for a lot of small business owners. This has been a devastating crisis, no doubt about it.
Well, Caleb, one of the things that I've been thinking lately is this. At some point, like everything goes over the waterfall. I mean, they put evictions and they put things on hold. That's it. It's not like they're saying, okay, no one's going to get evicted, no one's going to get their power turned off, water turned off, anything like this. But it appears to me, let's just say the way things are going right now, the direction we're going in, June, July, August, something like that, as things open up more, and maybe a little later, but probably let's say July, August. In New York City, if things start to open up, there are literally millions of people in this country who don't have a job, who are going to be 3 and 4 months behind in all of their bills, car, everything, and still no income. So they won't be able to pay the next month, and they'll be 3 or 4 months behind. And here's what I've been thinking, Caleb, and this is something I'm sure you're ready to comment on. People are going to look to Capitol Hill and expect our government to bail them out because they've seen them bail all the corporations out. And I don't think they're getting bailed out. Are we going to just literally have tens of millions of homeless people? Are we going to have tens of millions? I don't know. What are your thoughts on it? Am I right or wrong when I say we're going to hit a point when the spigots are going to open up? But at any rate, Caleb, what are your thoughts on that?
Our attitude in the United States has been, in comparison to most Western countries, we've said sink or swim. You're on your own. Your problem, your health care is your problem. Your education is your problem. The government's not going to provide you a job. The government's not going to provide you education. This is the American way. Work hard, get ahead. And if you don't, well, that's on you. And we're now facing a situation where we have millions and millions of people in the United States who've just been devastated by this pandemic. And that's going to be bad for everybody. Look, at the beginning of this pandemic, we had a disastrous situation where people would do the responsible thing. They'd come back from traveling in South Korea or China, and they would go and get a test, which is what you should do, right? And they would then get hit with a bill of thousands of dollars for getting that test. And on top of that, now in the United States, where your health care is linked to your job, right? That's how the health care works. All these people have lost their jobs because of the pandemic. Now all these people's access to health care has significantly decreased during a pandemic when it should be, if anything, increasing. If anything, access to health care should be on the rise because of the situation. Now it's decreasing. I mean, this is just deeply irrational. And it points to the irrationalities of the capitalist system and the profits in command, rule of the dollar, the anarchy of production. This is a question a lot of people are going to have to be asking themselves. It's interesting, on the right even, you have a significant rise in criticism of capitalism. If you listen to Tucker Carlson and some of the commentators there, it seems like the love affair the United States has had with free markets for so long is being eroded in the mind of the public. Now, what do we do about it? How do we fix things? People say universal basic income might be the answer. There's a push for, Medicare for all. There are different solutions, but it seems like this, you're on your own, sink or swim. If you have a problem, that's your fault. That's your problem. Society has no obligation to the individual. It seems like free market thinking is on the way out here in the United States. This is a situation where many people that have repeated those platitudes for so long are having to do a double take.
Okay, so let me push back on that a little bit because I think what you're seeing is people are doubling down on the free market. What actually again, a significant minority, a vocal minority, is doubling down on it. And what they're saying is, and I think this is in a sense irrefutable, if you're going to argue for the free market, you then can't tell businesses they can't open. In other words, you're saying if the sink or swim thing, it's one thing if you're saying sink or swim. A lot of people can deal with that, and they have dealt with that. But what they see is government oppression, and they don't like it, and that's why you're seeing it. And it is hard to argue with that in a sense, because if you're a small business owner, we were talking about this in the show last week. If Garland's got a clothing store and it's on Main Street and it's just Garland's clothing store, it's a one-off, it's his clothing store, they can't open. But Walmart and Target, because they also sell groceries, they are completely open for business. And when you go into Target or Walmart to buy your, Cheerios or whatever you're getting, you're going to go over and buy shirts and underwear and pants and socks and everything else, and people are doing it. So in a sense, what the argument would be, Caleb, is that that's not the free market at all. Saying, hey, Garland, you can't open your business is a tyranny. It's big government tyranny by Democrat governors. And that's what, again, I'm not even trying to make that case because I don't agree with a large part of it. But I think the people who liked capitalism before, the people who were in favor of the free market, and Tucker's one of them, But Tucker's always been. Tucker sees he's reasonable. I don't know how to put it. He's like a reasonable libertarian leaning Republican who sees that, for instance, mass automation, driverless trucks, let's say, would displace a huge amount of the workforce and is willing to confront that. But with this crisis right now, when you tell a business they can't open, that's not the free market. Caleb, what's your take?
Well, what's interesting is it seems like this has opened up that old fight in U.S. politics, a long-standing fight between the rich and the ultra-rich, because Amazon has made out like a bandit in all of this. Walmart is doing very, very, very well. And meanwhile, if you look at, the Hobby Lobby, that's a company that's tied to Donald Trump and all of that, they've been devastated by this. Of course, the stores have been closed until further notice. And it seems like some of the richest, ultra-rich corporations have seen this as a moment to secure their monopoly with the protection of the state, whereas most business owners have just been absolutely devastated. I mean, fracking. The fracking companies, forget it, right? I mean, look at West Texas, where we see so many companies, so many of these little oil companies that do less than like maybe 1,000 barrels or so, and they are just being, devastated. And they're saying, oh, China might buy us out. There could be a Chinese takeover of American oil, so please, government bail us out to protect us from China. But fracking companies, little oil companies, drilling operations, exploration, so many of the lower-level capitalists in the United States that are rich, maybe they're millionaires, maybe they're even billionaires, but they're not part of the club, have seen this as a moment to just get completely steamrolled and rolled over by those monopolies that are protected by the state. And this is a long-standing disagreement in American politics. You can go back to the 1950s when the John Birch Society would accuse the Rockefellers of being communists. Well, how are the Rockefellers communists? Well, they weren't communists, but they were part of that liberal Eastern establishment. They were so wealthy that they were open to having a little bit more social democracy and having the government protect their monopoly rather than having a free market model. You can talk about Howard Hughes and things that have gone on with him, and that there is a long-standing divide between more managerial elements in the capitalist class versus more entrepreneurial and free market-oriented elements. And it seems like the folks that want this to open up are the ones that feel like the government is not going to protect them in a time like this.
Well, the other thing I think, Caleb, that is going to have a dramatic effect on small business is they're seeing these coronavirus bills come out one after another. There's a talk right now. They're putting together some proposals to bring back business from China, and they want to put a $25 billion reshoring fund out for big corporations to bring their businesses, to entice them to bring back their businesses from China. We're talking about $1.9 billion in tax benefits that some of the oil companies have been able to get as a result of the stimulus legislation. So that's the other part. We're seeing now where the government, and people have said it before, radical individualism for everyone else and socialism for the corporations, where the government just pretty much bails them out and gives them unlimited money. And I think that's going to have effect on how people view their government and the things that their government needs to do to protect them and the things that's not happening. But we will be right back. We're out of time for this segment. We're talking with Caleb Maupin. We'll be right back. We're talking jobs and healthcare. You're listening to the most informative radio show in the Milky Way galaxy. It's Fault Lines with Nixon and Stranahan.
Fault Lines.
So Sean, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, Bob, that's easy. I want to talk about the need to stop the development of self-driving cars.
Again, Sean, you're driving me nuts. I think the self-driving car thing's already out of the gate.
No. It's never too late. See, now the leading experts in the field, just pick one, whichever one, leading experts have repeatedly warned us about the dangers of artificial intelligence. Look, I'm telling you, man, we have to stop the robots by any means necessary.
I see what you did there.
Yep.
Tune into our show By Any Means Necessary daily from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Radio Sputnik. And don't forget to call in at 3:20 p.m. to our studio number 202-521-1320.
And if you miss us live, check us out on SputnikNews.com, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date on the latest political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us.
Fault Lines.
We are back. Fault Lines with Nixon and Stranahan, 105.5 FM, AM 1390 in Washington, D.C., in Kansas City, 102.9 FM, 104.7 FM, and AM 1140 in the heartland. We're joined now by the great Caleb Maupin. He's RT correspondent, author, got a new book out. And Caleb, so let's talk about, you may be putting yourself at economic risk, Caleb. I want to warn you, because the big growth industry in the United States right now, I don't know if you've seen this, Garland, it's a huge spike. It's a very good industry to be in, is the blindly criticizing China industry. It is a fascinating growth field right now. Mike Pompeo does seem to have the market somewhat cornered, but I think they're taking new applications all the time, Caleb. And you would not qualify because you are going to say that the criticism of China is whack, as the kids say, I think. But let's talk about this. First off, tell people about your book on socialism. Tell people about that. Then I got a question for you about the brand of socialism. So talk about your book a little bit and tell people where to find it.
Well, sure. I mean, you can get a copy of my book. It's widely available. But I mean, when I talk about socialism, and
wait. Tell people the name. I'm going to help you be capitalist, Caleb.
Vandals.
What's the name of the? Go ahead.
Builders and Vandals in Our Age. It's gotten very good reviews. Many people have read it. It's being studied not just in this country, but it's in multiple libraries in Australia. It's been studied. I know people in Russia are studying it. People in Venezuela have been studying it. It's gotten quite interesting feedback. There's some translations of it that are in the works. It should soon be available in Italian and German as well. And it's been a hit. It's been kind of an underground hit. It's been popular with those who are interested in engaging in what socialism really means in our time and kind of getting past the Cold War understanding of these concepts and looking at the 21st century.
Okay, well, let me ask you this real quick. Now, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard this. There's different types of socialist or whatever. There's sort of subsets of that. And you're a fan of the Chinese. I've been told this, but I don't. And we've talked about it sort of peripherally. But you're a fan of the Chinese model. Is that correct, or am I getting misinfo there?
Well, I think that the Chinese model has been very, very successful in China. They call it socialism with Chinese characteristics, and it has taken a country that was one of the poorest in the world to being a country that's now the second largest economy on earth. They've raised 800 million people out of poverty, and they've applied socialism in China with great amount of success. I mean, and they have a market sector, but at the end of the day, the state controls production. And that is the difference between capitalism and socialism. Under capitalism, production is carried out simply for the profits of the owner. Profits are in command. But socialism is when a central plan dictates economic activity, when the economy is forced by the state to work in the interests of society. And that has been successful in China. We've seen good results there. But there are other models that have been successful. And I'm sure that when the United States does move towards socialism, I think that will happen eventually, it won't be an adoption of the Chinese model or the Russian model or Venezuela or anything like that. It'll be socialism with American characteristics. It'll be rooted in our own history, our own traditions of democratic struggles and popular movements for justice, and it'll be something uniquely invented by people here in this country to solve the problems here in this country.
Well, Caleb, my question is this, and Lee and I have discussed this with a lot of people. A lot of these words aren't meaning the same. There was red China of communism, blah, blah, blah. But when you look at it now, they've become mixed market, market economies, a little bit of everything. And when you look at us, people say we're a capitalist country, but the reality is we have Social Security and we have police departments and we're a mixed economy. And it seems to me that when I look at what we're doing, is some of the weaknesses, and certainly there's strengths of our economies, but some of the glaring weaknesses are being being exposed. And to me, one of the most glaring weaknesses right now being exposed, particularly by the coronavirus, is the issue of healthcare. In that, you want people in an issue like this, as soon as they start feeling sick, feeling anything at all, you want them to run to the doctor, or someone in their family, or whatever. You want them to get tested as quickly as possible voluntarily. And when people don't have health care coverage, and if you get tested and you're going to have thousands of dollars worth of bills and you're already out of work or struggling, you're not going to do it, even though you may be sick, simply because you can't afford it. So do you think we'll just continue to go forward, or do you think that the pandemic will force some kind of a rethinking and readjusting in how the United States applies its healthcare policy?
Oh, things are going to change, no doubt. I mean, if you look at this situation now, we've got tens of millions of unemployed people in the United States. Meanwhile, there is so much work that needs to be done. So much work needs to be done. Our infrastructure is falling apart. There's so much that people could be put to work doing. They could be rebuilding the country. They could be rebuilding our water systems and our electricity systems that are falling apart. They could be repaving our roads. They could be constructing high-speed trains. But they're not doing it because the market doesn't reward that, right? The market in capitalism, you're a worker, you only work as long as you can sell your labor to a capitalist, and a capitalist only hires you if he can make profits from your labor. And so we have a situation where things are falling apart, and there's people that are unemployed and need jobs, but it's not being done. Now, Roosevelt, he had the brilliance of setting up the Works Progress Administration, hiring millions of unemployed people, moving ahead. We saw in his final years, Roosevelt put forward a proposal for a new economic Bill of Rights that would guarantee jobs and housing and education. And, the Roosevelt vision during the Great Depression significantly helped the country and laid the basis for the economic boom that came later after the Second World War was concluded. He had built all this infrastructure and built up the country in ways that kind of laid the basis for us to have a huge economic expansion afterwards. But if you look at it, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, one of our most beloved presidents, he was aligned with the Communist Party pretty blatantly. He brought union organizers and socialists to the White House. He even let Gilbert Green, a member of the Young Communist League, sleep over at the White House at one point to make a statement to Congress. But he's not the only one. Abraham Lincoln, another widely loved U.S. president, he had a communist general named August Willich in the Union Army in the fight against slavery. And he got the endorsement of Karl Marx. The New York City Republican Party newspaper was the New York Tribune, and it had Karl Marx as its London correspondent during the U.S. Civil War. So there is a whole history of socialists in this country, fighting for justice, opposing slavery, opposing racism, fighting for the rights of women, fighting for the rights of workers on the job. And I believe when we're facing a situation like this, where so many people are left without and suffering, while the ultra-rich in this country have just been soaking in profits and securing their monopolies, there's going to be a situation where people are going to demand that the state take action to protect working families. And I think that there is going to be a shift in this country already significantly. I mean, we've seen with Bernie Sanders, and talk of democratic socialism and expanding a welfare state has expanded very, very significantly in the past few years. But this crisis, I think, is going to be kind of a turning point, because many people are just furious with how things have gone down. And I think that a market sector would have a big part in an American socialist society. I cannot imagine an America where hotels and restaurants are run by the government. That would never happen here. But I think banking could be run by the state. I think our oil, natural gas, coal, and timber could be run by the state. I think that in the United States, we could have major industries like steel manufacturing run by the state. We could eventually have 5-year plans to develop the economy. We're an entrepreneurial people. We believe in growth. We believe in working hard and getting ahead. The problem is we have a capitalism now that seems to enrich itself not through expansion but through destruction. I mean, in prisons for profit. Goodness sakes, right? Prisons for profit. I mean, what could go wrong with that? We war for profit. We have so much situations in the United States where capitalists are enriching themselves not through the creation of wealth, but through destruction and devastation. This is a big problem of kind of profits and command gone mad, and I think the American people are getting sick of it.
Well, yeah. So we've had people say that. Richard Wolff, for instance, has been on. Brilliant accountant. I love having Richard on. Don't agree with him on a bunch of stuff, but a very smart guy. But I just don't see it. And the reason I don't see it is because I'm literally not seeing it. I'm not seeing. I think if you were inclined towards socialism before, you think the solution to this problem is socialism. And I think if you were inclined towards laissez-faire capitalism, you see the solution is laissez-faire capitalism. And what I see is people digging further into their positions. And then I see people in the middle who don't. I mean, the problem socialism is going to have in America always is that for the foreseeable future, and the thing was helping, it's that basically the American people, for whatever reason, irrational, rational, whatever, they don't like the word socialism and communism. Believes a bad taste in their mouth. It sounds bad. You were getting somewhat of a demographic change where people coming from Central and South America, the word does not have the same bad taste. But I see things, I see people digging in. I don't see a lot of conversions on this. I see a lot of people in the middle who are independent or apathetic to politics, which is most people, just sort of going, I'm not interested in the Bernie Sanders thing. I don't know what's going on, but I'd like my family not to die, for instance. That's what they'd like. And they're going to work it out, and it's not going to be socialism that saves them, because I don't think there's a real proponent of that in the popular culture, even Bernie Sanders. I mean, you'd agree, Bernie Sanders is not really a socialist. I mean, anything he's proposing is sort of like progressive Democrat, but it's not really, he's not suggesting the workers control the means of production, correct? I mean, that you don't see Sanders as a dyed-in-the-wool socialist in terms of the policy proposals he's making, right, Caleb?
Yeah, and one of the problems I would say, and part of the reason my book is called City Builders and Vandals in Our Age, is that a lot of the left-wing politics in the United States, especially since the 1960s, has been very, very pessimistic and dark. And, even the Bernie Sanders movement, there's kind of an element of, everything's falling apart. Give me some free stuff. Give me some health care. Who cares what happens? The world is crumbling. We're all going to die from global warming. There is no, it's a very dark kind of view of the world. It becomes very cynical, very, kind of appeals to some of the worst elements in people, jealousy, resentment, etc. But if you look at, the history of Marxism, and if you look at the history of socialist construction around the world, it has been appealing to the best in people, and the optimism and the hope and the collectivism of people that has been the strength of socialism. A great American writer named Anna Louise Strong, who was, she was on the Seattle School Board and was kicked out for opposing World War I. She went and lived in the Soviet Union, and she wrote about how she felt like during the 1930s, when the Soviet Union was industrializing with the 5-year plans and, becoming this economic superpower, becoming the greatest steel manufacturer in the world, developing its oil industry, electrifying the country, she felt like the American spirit of entrepreneurialism and that hard work, motor-minded, go-get-'em spirit that she associated with America, she felt like that was very alive in the Soviet Union as they were working to rapidly raise their country out of poverty. And that if you look at, China's economic expansion, if you look at what, Gaddafi, he took a country that was deeply impoverished and desertous and made it into the top oil producing country in Africa. He built the great man-made river, which is the world's largest irrigation system, had the highest life expectancy on the African continent until Obama's military intervention that has destroyed the country ever since. It's been devastated since 2011. If you look at that, you can find kind of a go-get-'em, work hard, spirit in socialism around the world. Socialism does kind of appeal to that entrepreneurialism, as strange as that sounds. Many, many things are contradictory. when we look at it. I mean, the Cold War, this notion that you're going to have a completely state-run economy, the old ML, Joseph Stalin, central planning model, that's not coming back. But meanwhile, I don't think laissez-faire capitalism is doing too well either. I think the notion that we should have a state that organizes the economy, but also let people.
Caleb, unfortunately, we are just about out of time. We certainly appreciate you coming on. Another great and brilliant segment. He's Caleb Maupin is a speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst, and author of City Builders and Vandals in Our Age. We'll be right back. 2 more hours of the most informative radio show in the Milky Way galaxy. Fault Lines with Nixon and Stranahan.